I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, I love it, I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with this hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Mike Washington is on assignment. He says he has some final things to take care of, but he is planning and reviewing his schedule to get back to his diligence and working with us. So excited about that news. But with that being said, the show must go on, and we have a cast to make sure we can get that done for you. We do have Charles Bishop and we have Bryan Fulford. With that being said, let me say welcome to episode 678 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show, the podcast, the show that's covering the sporting HBCU dashboard, all things HBCU sports for institutions large and small, from the NEIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. We just simply call it HBCU Sports Pedagogy. With that being said, I am your host, Dr. Kenyatta, along with my co-host today, which is none other than Charles Bishop, Bryan Fulford. I see Charles squinting to look at something, so I'm going to talk about him without his glasses. We're coming from our home studios and sending a signal live to our KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, multi-Hall of Famer Ralph Cooper in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Yeah, we need him to double up on his contact lenses. They not working too well.
I know. It's been a long day with these allergies.
Yeah, they working.
Yeah, I had to take the contacts out today. So.
Other than that, how you doing?
Doing well. Looking forward to a little staycation weekend, 4th of July. So looking forward to that. So should be a fun few days and whatnot. Spend a little time with the wife.
Sounds good. Staycation. You staying in place?
Staying in place, but out of Houston, or far enough to be out of Houston, but gonna enjoy that part. So
staying in place, but not staying in place.
Right.
But I got it. Good deal. Mm-hmm. How you doing, Bryan Fulford?
I'm doing well. I need to learn how to do that. I need to learn how to stay somewhere, maybe I don't know. Maybe I got to find me a wife first to do all that. But I don't know. Taking applications,
I will tell you this: once you decide to tie it up in terms of having a wife, you may not have a choice. That's the other part of this. It ain't gonna be about what you want.
Tenfold, exactly.
Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting, education, consulting, and data analytics. With that being said, I am looking forward to this weekend vacation time, as I take an extra couple of days, the day before, the day after, to extend this weekend. But I must admit, it will not be anything like a stay vacation. We're going to go abroad, not short distance, nothing to act like it's a long travel, but it is a beautiful place, as they like to say, paradise. I'm going to the Bahamas, and so I'm going to put my feet in some blue water and certainly in some comfortable sand. And the rest of it, I will not be able to talk about on the show.
That's a good thing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Right, exactly.
With the today, a lot of people recognize this, and we have a couple more years, essentially 4, to finish this up, as it is Happy Bobby Bonilla Day to all who celebrate it. There are a couple of other Major League Baseball athletes that are on this contract. I know a lot of folks like to get into the business finance, as we was talking about. So, well, what if he took all the money up front and invested in compound interest? Yes, that could have happened, but people forget about the details. This goes back to the Enron days, and Charles, you remember that being out of the greater Houston areas, how much of an issue that was, and it went obviously throughout the nation and in a lot of ways international in terms of how he bankrupted that company and cost a lot of investors. Well, Major League Baseball and some of the franchise were investors in that, and one of the reasons he even had to create this kind of deal was because the money wasn't there. So it wasn't like he could have taken that up front for those financial folks up there. Some of this is contractual arrangement. You see this with Ohtani bringing it forward. This kind of deal does this where he gets much more money down the stretch, and it does some safety nets for him. It also allows his team to be more competitive. There's different reasons why players, along with their agents, negotiate deals like that. But that particular one was unique, and it was actually coming from two places. He gets half his money. Everybody realizes basically some $1 million, just a little bit over that. Half his money is coming from the Mets, and people don't realize the other half is coming from the Orioles as he split time there. Both of those deals were set up like that because of what took place in the fiasco with Enron, with a lot of folks literally losing their savings. And it sounds like we're going to find ourselves in that situation again. Some folks have not learned from history. And so we're, as the old African proverb says, if you don't learn from it, you're bound to repeat it. And it looks like we're going through that cycle again. So buckle up, people out there, and pray for the best of you, for those that are in situations that will be directly affected early. For many, people don't realize that they will be affected later regardless of how well you are right now financially. Unless you are a millionaire, and certainly you're in good stead if you're a billionaire. If you're one of those, I'm kind of upset that you are watching the show and you haven't shared. But anyway, I guess that's how you keep all your money.
I had just started my career when Enron jumped off. They had a whole section of my colleagues over there working on Enron. So,
oh wow, that is deep. See, full circle.
Full circle.
The other big announcement today, it is July 1st, so this is the day of conference training. We didn't have any huge news. But it also is the day, based on the settlement, that schools can now officially pay athletes. So be interesting. July 1st was that mark. A lot of teams had to opt in yesterday. So we'll probably learn more in terms of that. We've already heard about the SWAC as a conference with all 12 members opting in. But a couple of other things in terms of roster spots are laid out. So that'll be fascinating. I do have a nugget before we'll turn around and probably take our first break and let you come back and talk about what's on your mind in terms of some news of the day. But I wanted to get out there a little bit about this conference journey. I've been privileged with some information in terms of institutions that may look at that. One of them happens to be, I believe, Dillard is on the front line looking at whether operating in the NIA, staying as a member of the HBCU AC, is a position they want to stay in, or are they going to look at moving to the Division II, NCAA, and maybe becoming a member of the SIAC? So I'm fascinated to see behind the scenes in terms of presidents and athletic directors. Obviously, people have heard that follow the FBS level about the Pac-12 as it needed to get to 8. You heard the mix with Texas State, just to kind of give you an idea of those that may have followed that. Those are the same things that you'll look at with HBCU institutions, whether it was FAMU and Bethune-Cookman a couple of years ago, North Carolina A&T, and Hampton before that, Winston-Salem State moving from the MEAC at the Division I level back to the CIAA at the Division II level, Savannah State leaving the MEAC, for that matter, moving into the SIAC. But it'll be fascinating to see the background in terms of athletic directors that do all the diligence and the work about, do they see this as a branding moves to move from the NAIA to the NCAA Division II, moving with similar and like institutions, private institutions in the HBCU AC, significant brands such as Talladega, for that matter, Wiley University. We talk about Paul Quinn moving in. And so Houston-Tillotson University moving into the HBCU AC as they announced they're churning. But what would that look like now with Dillard out of New Orleans in the base of you have with Atlanta, with Clark Atlanta or Morehouse. So I'm fascinated to see as this turns, when we get a chance to see more of that information and try to see behind the scenes in terms of presidents and ADs, commissioners for that matter, how do they come together to see about what this looks like. So just kind of wanted to put that out there a little bit as this is the day when you hear conference certain where it has to go effect. So it'll be fascinating to see on the other side after we turn this first break to see what direction Charles and Bryan want to go for the HBCU news today.
There's a shot.
That might be. It could be.
Right field. Grand slam. What a shot. That's how you get hot, young fella.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do, and all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
The human voice has always connected audiences with experiences. Major brands all across America have trusted Kever's voice time and time again. Conversational, powerhouse, intelligent, and sincere. That's the voice you need for your creative marketing process. KEAVERSVOICE.com. Kever's Voice, Kever's Voice, KeversVoice.com. Always on, all the time.
This is Bryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
Football fans, HBCU football is back in the ATL with the Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge Kickoff. Representing the MEAC, North Carolina Central, and representing the SWAC, Southern Eagles, Jaguars, the Marching Sound Machine, the Human Jukebox. The kickoff trophy is up for grabs, and bragging rights are on the line. The rivalry is real. Bring the family and join us pre-game for the fun-filled Coca-Cola fan experience, including band jamborees, food, activations, and fellowship. For tickets and information, visit MEACSWACTalents.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip-hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
So back to it. Dr. Mills inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Charles and Bryan. Charles, let me go to you. What news of the day has you thinking twice?
Well, I'm sure Bryan will probably want to get this out there, but Valley and FAMU is now set for Atlanta. Weeks after it was announced, Florida A&M will play Mississippi Valley in Atlanta. A kickoff time has been declared. The game originally scheduled for October 4th at Rice-Titan Stadium in Itta Bena was moved to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. The significant move follows last season's dramatic showdown at Bragg Memorial in Tallahassee, where the Delta Devils triumphed over the Rattlers by a score of 24-21, ending FAMU's historic 23-game home winning streak. So, Angela Suggs, FAMU's vice president and athletic director, confirmed the move, stating they opted to come to FAMU, Georgia, commonly referred to as Atlanta. So on October 4th, we won't be in Atlanta, Mississippi. Instead, we will be facing Mississippi Valley State at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. So, it's all set for Atlanta.
Good stuff. We touched on this maybe a little bit, but want to encourage those to go check out Sports Rap with Bryan and AD. They really did a great job in terms of diving down in terms of this game, but in more important, just classics, historically. Where do they come from? And obviously, beat my chest a little bit. They got to love some of that history AD did from a couple of books and journal articles I wrote. So I would say he did a really good job of putting that information on the table. So I encourage you to go check it out. If I say so myself. Bryan, literally myself. Bryan, what's on your mind? Since Charles stole your thunder,
No, that's all good. Besides making my plans to go to Atlanta for the first weekend in October. Okay. Besides that, I think real quick, I will say what's interesting is I think that game brings up a lot of conversations about neutral sites and giving up a home game and the benefits of it. And it does, I think we started talking about classics and things and the financials that go into moving, what does it cost at home versus what you get when you go on the road. And with the exception, of course, of Jackson State, everybody has, I think, advantages of moving games away from home. And I say that, Charles, because, of course, you guys have the advantage of playing in a 50,000 plus stadium, something that nobody else has, and nobody. Well, the highest would be maybe half of that. So, I think it's interesting to talk about the financials, which is something that I made a pledge to try to get more into, and we'll do that a little bit later on. But let me get to.
Go ahead and jump out with your news, and we'll actually come right back to that.
Yeah, well, my favorite artist, my favorite musical artist of the time, Beyonce. She made a 6-figure donation.
On first name, he said, "Babe."
Oh yeah,
must be nice.
She made a 6-figure donation to hometown Texas Southern's Ocean of Soul band. This coming from HBCUsports.com. The Houston native global superstar, formerly known, or not formerly, but more traditionally known government name, Beyonce Knowles Carter, donated $100,000 to Texas Southern University, Ocean of Soul marching band. The gift was made through her Bay Good Foundation, or Be Good Foundation. I'm not really sure. Is it Bay Good or Be Good? Probably Be Good.
Probably Bay Good, just so you can stay out of the clutches of the beehive.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I don't want to upset them.
I was going to jump in this saving too, so thank you, Charles.
Thank you. I had it right the first time then, so that's good to know. I did hear it right the first time. Yes, the foundation is aimed at supporting the band's musical excellence and academic achievement, according to the Houston Chronicle, The donation follows the Ocean of Soul's high-profile collab with Beyonce during the 2024 Beyonce Bowl halftime performance at the Houston Texans Baltimore Ravens NFL game, which was streamed on Netflix. Great show, by the way. Over 200 band members took the field with her, delivering a performance that celebrated Houston pride and showcased the band's signature sound, precision, and choreography. I would argue that halftime might have been better than the Super Bowl halftime. I'm just saying. Just me. Just my personal opinion. I think it blew away.
That'll help you get back in good standing with the.
Thank you. And also, this is a personal point of privilege. I have not seen a live. Well, let me say, I have not seen Beyonce since her debut in 1998 with three other members known as Destiny's Child when they debuted at the formerly known as BET Soundstage in Walt Disney World in Orlando. Yes, I was there to see the debut, and she even walked by me, and that's when I realized how short she was. But she walked, but again, that time she was only probably maybe 17, 18 years old. Walked by me, you know. I felt like, wow, I was walking. You didn't know what was walking in front of me. But anyway, where was I? Lost myself here.
Let me say, it is an experience.
Yes.
The Beyonce Carter concert is a complete experience. So I give her all the props in the world.
I have to go. I have to find a way, you know, this summer to go, you know, while I can. Maybe I'll have to, you know, see what I can do. The Bay Good Foundation
had to go and let some money out of his pockets to support. But I don't know either was the wife or the
I was gonna say Charles probably had to spend some money. He probably had to spend some tickets. He probably had to take more. See, me, I can go just by myself and enjoy and probably have a good time because there's gonna be other you know people I can meet there. But yeah, you know, so just saying. This is a quote from Charlie Coleman III, the Senior Associate Vice President of Development and Alumni Engagement at TSU. The Bay Good Foundation's impactful investment affirms the powerful role that HBCUs play in shaping the next generation of artistic, academic, and cultural leaders. This partnership does more than support the Ocean of Soul. It opens doors for our students to access the arts in life-changing ways, inspiring by one of the most beloved artists of our time. It is a shining example of how philanthropy, can uplift communities and ignite futures. So yeah, congratulations to the Ocean of Soul, who has really, you know, I will admit, they have, you know, I don't know who's doing the latest band rankings, you know, but I would say the Ocean of Soul has quietly, over the last few years, moved from, I might say, bottom half, bottom third of recognizable bands in the SWAC to upper half, upper quarter, upper third. You know what I'm saying? I think they're up there. You know, I give them some credit. They're up there.
I certainly would say they're the upper half.
Yeah, yeah, easily.
For sure. I'm not going to necessarily be the one to say that they were at the bottom half. I
didn't say that. I didn't say that. You know, some might say that. Not me. Some might say that.
To your point, I think you're on it.
Thank you.
I did want to tease out before I take our next break, and might extend it just a little bit, to go back to the classic dialogue a little bit. As I said, to take a deeper dive, you really need to go watch Bryan and AD in the Sports Lab, because they were very comprehensive in terms of looking at it and chopping it up in so many different ways. But it was a buzz-worthy type conversation. But the reason I'm going back to this a little bit is the official announcement came out of the FCS teams can now play 12 football games. We talked about that it looked like it was going to be approved, but it was official. So what does this mean for HBCUs? So now I think that classic conversation becomes even more important in terms of what that looks like. A lot of HBCUs are playing what I've referred to now as the Super 2 and the Power 2, G5 institutions in terms of those. So I'm not sure how quick they will be to put 2 on the schedule. You might see a little bit, and I think it is also going to be more challenging to come across those games because those teams are going to be wanting to look at their strength of schedule. So to be able to get one, I think it's big. So since they're already likely playing one of those games, I'm not sure a 12th game allows them to really play more of those or another one of those, if that makes sense. That means that you're likely going to be playing more of your peers, FCS. But does it put classics back on the table? Because we've kind of seen classics maybe going the other direction. We've also seen the challenge with classics be able to financially put a package together that institutions based on ADs and VPs and the president's chancellors that sign off and the boards as well, of seeing financial packages that they feel are really appropriate for the value that they've seen. So that's been up, right? That's been a huge. And as was talked about in that they talked about 2 models, but there's actually 3 models that we talked about. One is promoter-driven conference, which is probably the older model that we've seen for a long period of time. Over the years, it really goes back, and they talked about the dates of when it goes back. And then you have institutional models where the institutions, to some degree, partner with each other, oftentimes working through the foundation and literally work and create the framework for a conference. We see that with the Florida Classic, the Bayou Classic, the Magic City Classic in some form does that. The other ones I talked about with the promoter are similar to the Southern Heritage Classic and State Fair Classic. The more larger, more popular ones we'll talk about here that are still moving forward. And then you have what I call the more nuanced framework of classics, which are the classics that happen to be named after or the heritage of former coaches that really had created legacies for themselves and are done embedded within the traditional schedule and played on campus. That's the third configuration of classics that has set up over the last 10, 15 years that people may not recognize it. But I wanted to get back in that talk a little bit before we move on, the financial components of this. And Bryan, you started to talk a little bit, and then I'll pass it to Charles. Get a little bit more of that conversation in terms of what you were going to go, in terms of how people look, whether it's the fans in their framework or even more importantly, the ADs. What do they see as a beneficial classic? And the last thing I'll put on here is I think it's important, while there needs to be a framework from a conference perspective of maybe a baseline, it is also important to understand that each institution, in terms of the brand, the size of their home stadiums, has their own mathematical formula they have to come up to see what they see as a value of a classic moving to a neutral site event specifically. Go ahead, Bryan.
Well, so the financials, and I'm sorry, I got distracted. I saw a couple of things in the comments, but I'm interested to see when we talk about the financials, and you talked about this increase in which now we have 12 games, right? Does having 12 games, what does that do to your home schedule now? Because in essence, right, everybody could probably guarantee 5 home games, right? I mean, you're going to have, well, and I'm talking SWAC in particular, but most teams, most conferences, you're probably going to play 4 conference opponents at home and then another non-conference. And then if you want to have that 6th home game, or maybe even 7th, like, PWIs, you have that opportunity. But then I talked about the value of going away. What is the value of going to a neutral site? I think there is real value for some schools in going to a neutral site, and for other schools, is there real value? Because when you go to a neutral site, I saw somebody mention the West Coast, right? What is the impact? I think it's interesting that a Jackson State and Grambling are 2 schools that made my top 6 of schools that can go west and still draw. Like Charles, you may be able to confirm this. You've heard that there's some 40,000 plus committed tickets already sold for this event. That's great. I think you can easily hit 50 by the time. When is that game being played? October? October
28th,
I think it is. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And that's probably a nice. I haven't been to Vegas, but I gotta imagine the weather is nice in October. Maybe it's not overbearingly hot, but even in terms of going further west, whether it be California, Arizona, you got to be able to bring 10 to 15,000 of your fans that want to come. I don't think everybody has 15,000 people that would want to travel west to see a game in a location that maybe you've never been to. So I think the classics, we talked about them being more regional based, is where you can benefit. But I think every school now has the opportunity with this 12 game schedule now to be able to look at and say, do we have any advantages of playing games in our city, right, versus playing somewhere else regionally? And then the finances of what does it cost to produce a home game versus, because you're looking at revenue and expenses, right? Maybe only drawing 15 to 20,000 in your home ballpark versus going away from home and hopefully drawing 25 to 30 to 35,000, at a similar cost. And if you can get partnerships with promoters of the city to help you offset a lot of the expenses, I think it ends up being a win for certain schools. Every school can't do it, but I think there are some schools who can, and those ADs every year will look to see what advantages can be made going off campus.
So let me go down the rabbit hole here. So what do you think the calculus was Valley had, at least with looking at playing Florida A&M in Atlanta? I know Atlanta is a mecca for a lot of HBCUs, but especially with regards to FAMU's fan base being there in Atlanta. What were some of the things that you guys kind of looked at in terms of what were the advantages for Valley going to Atlanta on this?
The last two times that Florida A&M played Valley, and I think the attendance number, and I can't take credit for this, I think Doc supplied this information, but it's out there, 1,500. I don't even think it drew more than 2,000. But Rice Totten Stadium is a 10,000 seat stadium. So you had less than 20% capacity, probably in the ballpark of 15% capacity for a game against Florida A&M. Of course, no band showing up, right? The 100 is not traveling to Itabena, not happening. Okay, so juxtapose that against moving a game to Atlanta, where I think you guys mentioned this. There's a strong alumni base of Valley alums in Atlanta. You might even draw more Valley fans in Atlanta than you would in Itabena. And for a fact that you're going to draw more FAMU fans. So I think for the promoter and anybody who's pitching this to Valley and saying, hey, you're only going to make, I don't want to give a number because I didn't do the math, but do start with the math of 1,500 times $25 a ticket. Okay. I think you surpass that tenfold in Atlanta, where so any promoter could offer Valley a good sizable chunk of change, 6 figures, which outweighs anything they would do at home. And you're saying, hey, your kids are going to get a play in the NFL stadium. The trade-off is, yes, you might lose a little bit of the crowd because 75 to 80% is going to be wearing orange and green. But the trade-off is it could be a financial win because Valley has a great home schedule already. They've got Southern coming to town. They got Jackson State coming to town. They got Homecoming. So they've got those 3 games in itself can probably draw, I'm going to say over 5. I'm not going to get wild and outrageous, but you can probably get over 5,000 people into Rice Totten Stadium on those 3 games. And then I think they moved another game, the Alabama State game, to Mobile. So I think when you're a school like Valley that's looking for revenue opportunities, this came along at a great time for them.
Yeah, I agree. in a lot of what you said there. The other thing that I think is important is, if we're frank, Valley has some ways to go before they become a contender, and they can put themselves in a position to get to Atlanta for the Celebration Bowl, which would give them the summer, obviously, even more exposure. The other thing that I've always tried to remind folks is a significant portion of the funding for an athletic program is based on your enrollment. How does Valley surpass the framework of enticing more folks to what we know is a really good institution? How much money would it take to brand Valley out in the marketplace? Getting Valley's brand into Atlanta, getting Valley's brand into Dallas, getting that brand into Chicago, which they went a couple of years ago, getting that brand in Detroit, getting that brand into New York and LA, and even regionally in terms of New Orleans. They have the brand in Jackson, obviously, but Nashville, for example, right? Shreveport, Mobile, Birmingham. How do you get those brands in that area? And the reason I say this, those are large markets, right, where you have huge African-American populations that have educational centers where students are involved that you recruit from. There's only so many people in the region of Valley where they can recruit those students. But if you're trying, and they're attracting those, they're already there. But how do you expand beyond that current base is to get into markets to recruit students. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through the Classic. One of the things I loved about what Bryan and AD did was tell the history. And some people probably skirt over that because they don't see the value in history, which puts us in the position I said earlier at the beginning of this show. When you don't know your history, there are things in your history that you do not want to repeat. If you don't aware of them or how they came about, it's easier for other folks to put you in a position to repeat those negative parts of the history. So, but there are also some good parts of the history that you learned about. One of the things that Classics, in terms of their historical nature, was to put them in marketplaces where you could celebrate the culture and create a bigger part of the culture with the Black or African-American community, which attracted what? Students to your campus, which is the name of the game, whether it's in athletics or overall universe for the enrollment, which guess what? If you grow your enrollment, now the money that you get associated with a larger money can go back to athletics, which helps you to put you in a position to have a more competitive program. So even if you're not going to make a dime directly off of this, the fact that you're in a position to get your brand out in the marketplace where you can obtain students to come to your institution, if you can get 200, 100 more students than you would have had, what financial gain have you made on that alone?
Yeah, Doc, I'm gonna go back to a class lecture. I mean, going back to the Grambling model, Collie Nicholson, putting the show on the road. So I think,
especially when you're in a rural area, and people forget there's a reason that why a lot of HBCUs in rural areas, because history said at the time you needed to be away from the other people, from white people that would do you harm. The Ku Klux Klan would see you making progress and would literally burn the institutions to the ground. So there was a time in our history that it was important for a lot of our institutions to be in rural areas. But we see now that in these larger metropolitan areas that they're more conducive to job opportunities and career paths, that a lot of us are moving in those places. But now you have to find a way to recruit out of those places. That's what Classics can do. Now, you still have to make sure that you're making business decisions. And as you alluded to, Bryan, it's a different calculation for Jackson State. It has a facility and an AD and a fervent, let's say it, call it what it is, fan base that supports them and understand that it's a different calculation for them to do the move. But still, when they found a deal that made sense, where they fans will go and they can also capture West Coast, they in Las Vegas.
Yep.
So even that model, because now it gives them a chance to recruit West Las Vegas, which is a growing metropolitan area. It allows you to pick up and put your marketing out there in LA, Oakland, San Francisco, Seattle, Phoenix to some degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think if you can get over the next 5 years because your presence there, and if it goes well, you might find one of those teams, if not both of those teams, going back ever so often. What if you can pick up an extra 100, which is out-of-state fees now, students, to 200 students to your institution because of your presence out there, which is paying off for 4 years while they're in school. Not the matter that if you duplicate that over a period of time. So I just think at points, we got to look at the bottom line specifically, but we also got to look bigger than that. We have to be strategic. We have to understand the business model and the business framework. We got to look at all the dynamics that are involved with these decisions as they go forward. With that being said, let's take our next break, come back on the other side. We'll talk a little bit about some other business news. As I gave you all some homework assignments on our last show Thursday before you had the weekend, Charles. So I had a lot of giving you plenty of time for our lab listeners to do the homework, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about another expansion model where we get into the NCAA votes to increase basketball schedules to 32 games. It's not a large huge, it's 31 to 32, but similar. This is another opportunity on the basketball side, which we hadn't seen a lot of classics or home games, but is this an opportunity to flip that and look at this as well? And I want to see you all's thought in terms of this business decision as well. We'll be right back after this next break. We'll come back on the other side and we'll talk about that model in terms of the college basketball NCAA approving moving to 32 game season beginning in 26-27. Charles, you got to do your homework. We'll be
Nope.
Come on, him?
Ooh, I like him.
Quick! The quicker picker-upper. Bounty picks up messes quicker, and each sheet is 2 times more absorbent, so you can use less.
He's an 8.
He's a 9.
Bounty, the quicker picker-upper.
This is Bryan Fulford. AD Drew and I are co-hosts of the BCSN Sports Lab. We talk about all things related to HBCU athletics. From the games, teams, coaches, and fan interest stories, we cover it all. You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Lab, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
This is the Dean of the College of HBCU Sports, Kenyatta Cavil of Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Come mix it up in the lab where the course lecture is in session every Tuesday from 6 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time on Facebook Live, YouTube Spreaker, or the BCSN app. As we discuss all things about the HBCU sports culture, including exploring the week that was in the sporting HBCU diaspora, as well as the upcoming week of HBCU Sports. With me, the Dean, the College of HBCU Sports, on Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Course lecture dismissed.
Football fans, HBCU football is back in the ATL with the Cricket MEAC SWAC Challenge Kickoff. Representing the MEAC, North Carolina Central, and representing the SWAC, Southern, Eagles, Jaguars, the Marching Sound Machine, the Human Jukebox. The kickoff trophy is up for grabs, and bragging rights are on the line. The rivalry is real. Bring the family and join us pre-game for the fun-filled Coca-Cola fan experience, including band jamborees, food, activations, and fellowship. For tickets and information, visit MEACSWACTalents.com.
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. So I wanted to get into this little talk. NCAA was released last week, has approved from the NCAA to move from 31 games to 32 games. This is beginning in 2026-2027. The vote was rubber stamp moved after the Division I Men's and Women's Basketball Oversight Committee voted in favor of the changes back in late March. The updates come after 19-year run of just a 31-game maximum for regular seasons, which started back in 2006-2007. The format before that was 28 or 29, and it could have been 29 if you did what they call predetermined games, plus allowances of 3 games, 2-game multi-team events added, making it a 31-game cap that you could do. And that's when you heard folks talk about these tournament games that you saw in season, Charles, specifically where you had to get approval from the NCAA to allow a tournament game to have a waiver. So they're kind of doing away with a little bit of that. So starting in 2026, teams won't be required to play 32 games. They will merely have the option to do so. So you don't have to go to 32. I think that's one first thing that's important here. But as you expand and look at this team pushes NCAA games to play as many as 41 games during the season. Now, if you're one of the larger schools, obviously having this game now means that you can play in these, what they call MTE tournaments. That's multi-team event tournaments. You see this where a lot of these teams are going to one of the tournaments in Las Vegas, which ties in the fact that the tournaments are looking at inviting students in where they can get paid directly with the new governing structure. So it's a new model of events where they invite some of the bigger brands in to pay in such a way that they can pay the teams directly. So those are something to think about what that means. So specifically, there's a primary issue driving the decision to go to 32, at least from somebody's standpoint, is the multi-team events, which has become more restrictive with some of their NCAA guidelines due to conference expansion, leading to schools from the same leagues playing in the same events, which was a concern by the NCAA voting it out. The other part is 32-game limit will include games meeting contests against non-Division I opponents. So I wanted to get your heads wrapped around this, and let's think about this from an HBCU perspective with tournament events, and how will this affect us from an AD's perspective. Brian, I'm going to go to you first. Charles looked like he's kind of churning on this a little bit.
I'm listening to all the metrics involved.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we are. That when you talk about the business side of this, that's what ADs are having to look at. And I think we don't always get a chance to ask them directly. So part of our guidelines is to discuss this. We're going to be everywhere in terms of people just hearing news. And if we're not on the forefront of HBCUs and folks that talk about this and see it as important, we're going to lose, because other folks are going to see these things and they're pushing for them and they're going to take advantage of it, but HBCUs are not. It's because we don't even put the information out there for us to discuss and learn and figure out how do we make it work best for us. So for me, it's an important part of the business perspective. And sometimes we got to take these pan points, and it's not just the fun part of talking other things, that there's time where we're going to have to talk the business of sports. We're going to have to make sure that our fans are educated so they're making educated decisions. This can't just all be about the culture part of this. It has to be some business points. So I'm going to go back to you, Brian, to talk a little bit about what do you see when you're hearing this changing of the landscape. The money part of this for the MTEs, multi-team events, where now you're having tournaments where they are inviting teams with the idea that they're going to pay players directly to participate in these tournaments. It also is a opponent where you can have a chance to have more home games, which we've seen over the last 15 and 10 years that I've been frankly frustrated about, that we play in so many games that we're not even playing home games. And I think it's affected the number of fans that are involved until about halfway through the conference season, where they recognize whether a team is good or not because of how they played in the conference. We don't have many non-conference home games. Is this an opportunity to take advantage of this, or do you see us going on the road even more so? Go ahead, bro.
Okay, so I just did a math search here. There are 22 weeks that make up the NCAA Division I season. 22 weeks. That's usually beginning about the first week of November all the way until maybe the last or the first week in March, and then you get into the conference tournament season. So 22 weeks, okay? Of course, this follows, of course, you got the holidays that are mixed in there. Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's, okay? So, but I think what's interesting, and we've seen this happen in other conferences, the SWAC, for example, plays 18 games. And they usually don't start until the first full week of the new year, which unfortunately many schools are not, they're not in. So you're losing out an opportunity of somebody starts their season at home without the students. We've long complained about that at our schools in Florida. I'm not going to beat that horse anymore. It's dead. But what I think it does give an opportunity, Doc, is it gives an opportunity for maybe, think about this, the SWAC to possibly expand to a 20-game conference schedule, leaving thus still 12 non-conference games. And follow me here, get excited about this, folks. How about those 2 extra games, maybe even 3, putting them into December, where guess who's still on campus? Students, fan bases, and maybe build a little excitement heading into the conference season that starts in January. You can still go back to playing, non-conference MTEs into December and travel and do all that stuff during the holiday break, because most coaches want to play. Most coaches don't want to take, speaking as a basketball coach, we don't want to take 2 weeks off. I know, and I say this to anybody who's got kids, once your kid moves to high school, there's no Christmas break, folks. Your kid goes to varsity level, there's no Christmas breaks. Give that up. That's over. So don't plan, mom, dad, don't plan Christmas breaks if your kid expects to play varsity high school basketball, because us coaches, the one thing we don't want to do is restart. And if you have to spend 2 weeks of playing no games, guess what you end up doing in January? Having to restart. So that same mindset is with college coaches as well. They don't want to restart. So they're going to play games over the holiday break. They're going to find ways to play. So I just think adding these extra games, could you competitively find some non-conference home games? Yes. But what I'd love to see even better than that, Doc and Charles, give me some conference home games in December. Something that we can, because, hey, and guess what also is over in December? Hello. Football season is over. I mean, of course, with the exception of Celebration Bowl and the SWAC Championship, it is pretty much, some Charles would say it's over for a lot of people, really maybe sooner. But for those of us who expect to be playing in late November or December, okay, yes, I said it. Football season is over by Thanksgiving. So great time to give a home conference game in early December. Maybe even, how about this? Maybe that big rival game that the SWAC likes to schedule us in January when nobody's in the home arenas. I'm just saying. But let me get that game on a December before finals week. That would be an awesome game, or maybe 1 week, whole week before. I think I I like 32. And it's still, you have days where nobody has to play 3 games in a week, so it's not going to be ridiculous like an NBA schedule. The max you still would have to play in 1 week is 2 games. There's even opportunities to play 1 game a week, which gives you more practice time. I like it. I love the opportunity that comes with playing 32 games. I hope HBCUs take advantage of it, especially the SWAC.
I love the opportunity, and I guess I asked the fan question: is do you get that basketball fervor in early December? Do you get that? I guess does it significantly affect the bottom line of the athletic department in terms of trying to get those conference games in the early part of December, or is it, are your fan bases, have they completely turned their attention to basketball?
I think with good marketing and promotions, they can, and that's where an overextended athletic department or staff, and they are sometimes, a lot, mostly, they have to put that into the plans of all the things that they do and schedule those kind of things where we can say, hey, okay, we have to, football is winding down, volleyball is winding down. We have to now, instead of waiting until maybe next month to ramp up our marketing and promotions, let's start it a little bit sooner and put it into our schedule. So that way now we can start running some promotional things during the November football season to kind of say, hey, basketball's coming. The team is playing, or hey, we've got home games coming, or hey, the conference season is starting in December. It can be done. You just have to do a little bit of planning.
Yeah, and I think that's a very fair question, Charles, that you asked about where are the fans. But sometimes the reason the fans are not there is because you have effectively positioned them in that.
Yeah.
So if you effectively have pushed them in that direction for the last 10, 15, some people may say even 20 years, it means that you can push them back in the other direction. So let's say that we become a little more innovative about this. And when I say innovative, not because it has never been done, but you're starting to see folks forced to think a little bit different. How many of y'all have caught the news in regards to the ASUN? I used to call it Sun Atlantic to tease them, but ASUN. And what was the lack of the WAC in terms of United Football League in terms of their strategic alliance? We kind of heard this alliance between the Big Ten and the SEC. Now, some people will say it's already falling apart, but that's a whole different discussion. But one of the things that are talked about in this ASUN WAC alliance is that a large part of this is to reduce overall costs in terms of duplicate process they have, but more importantly is the scheduling process they have. One of the things that I read and heard in terms of this will hit home for schools like Norfolk State, Jackson State, and women's basketball, even men's basketball a couple of years ago, Texas Southern a couple of years ago, as they were playing some really good basketball and winning in some of their Division I road matchups, it became even harder to schedule. What would happen if you had a strategic alliance with the SWAC and the MEAC, or one with the SIAC, CIAA, even at the Division II level, which obviously doesn't follow this guideline for the name of the games, but there's some other benefits there. You already have an alliance that they came up with saying that they were going to work together, the commissioners. But what if you had even a more formal process that created some strategic alliance between a scheduling model that would put out some of these games, such as a Norfolk State and Texas Southern, where you got to push it and was a more formal process where everybody looked at a certain time of the year that you were going to have these MEAC SWAC crossover games that folks now are prepared for, such that you lead off into what is going to be the Celebration Bowl, which features the champions of this. But you could kind of book in that, and you start out the year with the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Now you make it more formal through process. And let's say we take it even to another level, where you actually had a matchup coming out of football, whereas North Carolina Central and Southern, but let's say that this was a year-long matchup where you had a basketball game, men's side. You had a women's basketball game. You had a softball basketball game, right? And what other sports that you can make it do that kind of goes out through the year? Unfortunately, Central doesn't have a baseball team anymore, but there are some other ones out there.
But you got an opponent for the year.
Yeah, where you looked at these matchups between these two teams or various teams versus SWAC MEAC strategically, where you looked at it where you had now the North Carolina Central University and Southern University are going to match up in various sports to see which one is supreme over the year. What if you had this with Jackson State in a matchup against a MEAC team such as South Carolina State in football, in basketball, right? Softball.
A MEAC SWAC Challenge Cup.
Yep, over. And so I'm saying we have to find a way to take these opportunities that we see that we think are just snapshot and maybe boring news and understand how do you take that in the HBCU culture in such a way that you can be more advantageous, more framework in terms of how you can create unique partnerships that make it work. It's a challenge. It's going to take more thought process financially. There's certain things that you got to look at, but I'm saying, do you even consider it from an innovation strategic framework to do that? And that's what I wanted to kind of get out of making sure when these news come up about understanding what this looks like is not just to overlook it, but take it and understand what is going over in the whole sport business landscape and how do you make it work for HBCUs to our advantage. Go ahead, Bryan.
Here's an idea. I'm stealing this from conferences that already do this on basketball. How about a MEAC SWAC Challenge Basketball Week? What do you have? 9 schools in the MEAC? Is it 9 or 8? 8. So we're talking 8 schools, right? 8 schools. And you could essentially, with your TV partners, 2 games a day, 2 games on Monday, 2 games on Tuesday, 2 games on Wednesday, 2 games on Thursday. 1 at a SWAC location, 1 at a MEAC location, right? 4 and 4. Now, added in combination, Doc, with your football game, 9 events, right? And then what do you get? Whoever comes out of that gets your inaugural MEAC SWAC Challenge Cup. I don't know. I'm just spit brain and throwing ideas out. Mr. Grant, feel free to use. Just add me and Charles on the broadcast somewhere. That's all we ask. That's all we ask. And bring in Doc here as well. 3-man team right here. We got it all covered. We got the play-by-play. We got the color commentator. We got the third-person historical analyst here. It's all right here for you, Mr. Grant. But yeah, no, I mean that would be an awesome way to take that 1 extra game and make it mean something, make it significant into what you were just talking about, Doc.
Great point. And all I'm saying is that we have to consider and think about these things in terms of what they look like. So the other part of that is on the opposite side. I gave you a final homework, and we'll kind of close it here. We won't go take a deep dive in this, but we need to keep our eyes on this. The decision on whether or not to expand the NCAA men's and women's basketball tournament will be made in upcoming weeks. I think we know for a fact there's foregone conclusion that this is going to be financially beneficial in some way. So they're going to expand the games, right? Question is just how much. It's currently at 68. They're going to look at 72. There's some question to go to 76. They probably put the 76 out there because, like Charles just kind of did with his eyes, they were like, oh, that's crazy. So they'll probably do a happy medium and go to 72. But there's a couple of ways to look at this. Obviously, I'm going to give a shout out to Charles Edmond and the Carlos Brown show where they discuss this at times. Is about moving off that 16 seed, about that first 4, men's and or women regularly for various sports. But I can tell you this, this is going to move a lot of those conferences that are on the 16 seed. It's going to make it even more challenging to move off that line. Because essentially what you're expanding is what happened is you went from 4 16 seeds, right, to 6 16 seeds when you went to the 68. That means 2 15 seeds previously now all of a sudden became what? 16 seeds.
16 seeds, yep.
So if you do the math, if you go to 4 more, which means you had, right, 6 16 seeds, that means essentially your 15 seeds now have all floated and pushed back to 16 seeds, which makes it diligent as you more challenging, I should say, climbing up to the 15 seed or the 14 seed, because all those seeds are going back down until you get to that 12 seed, essentially, where you've seen some of those Power 2 and Super 2 programs move into those seeding charts. So all that's going back down. So it's a long way to say that you're further and it's more challenging to move up to those higher seeds if they expand the tournament.
I'm sure it's been thought about, but I mean, in terms of the expansion, how do you deal with kind of what to me looks like a compressed calendar? Because we got conference tournaments that precede the NCAA tournament. And then I just happened to notice it seems as though right after we finished the NCAA tournament, the Masters was like sitting right behind the NCAA basketball tournament. So with regards to that part of it, I mean, how will expansion like affect the calendar?
I don't think right now that we're anywhere close to the cliff. I think right now the reason you're even seeing the talk of expansion because people are so inundated and so hungry for sports that there's so many eyeballs on it that it's not in a position where it's going to start going down. It's still on an upward tick. And the other thing that you got to remember that is pushing this, obviously, is the financial side of this. But as these social media platforms that are now becoming broadcasting environments, YouTube, obviously, and the other ones that are out there that are coming in now, looking at getting more content. They're just going to drive up the dollars. You already had a report that came out that said this was the first time where social media content was higher. It was just a couple of percentage points, 50% more higher than your broadcast or over TV broadcast. Right? So people are watching social media content more and more. So which is going to push what you used to see over the air on cable broadcast. It's going to push it further down, and more folks are getting into the social media side of these programs, right? When you talk about it from that perspective. So you'll see that in terms of Amazon Prime, you're going to see them getting more into this business of looking at bidding at sporting rights from the professional level down to those Super 2, Power 2. You start seeing that change, and it's going to trickle down. My overall point is I don't see it flooding the camera, which is something that will be a concern at some point, but I don't think it's anywhere close. What you'll see them do if they expand to 72 or 76, you'll just see 2 different places, right? You see the first 4, it's in
Dayton.
Ohio, Dayton. Mm-hmm. You'll see some other spot where they'll have a first 4. So you'll instantly see 2 first 4s, and they'll just cover it. They'll have some early in the day, something later in the day, and it just give reasons for folks to try to skip work to go see these games.
Good. Yeah, I mean, I think with the athletic calendar,
you know why? Brian knows why. You know why, Charles? We don't do this a lot, but there's a lot of folks that like to bet on it.
Yes, they do.
Hey, just add 2 more games to the menu. That's it. People thirsty. They're hungry.
Well, you're gonna have a lot of folks trying to get to Las Vegas because they just like to be there at the place to see some games on TV, sip some beverages, to make sure they can wager some bets. So,
always a great place to be when conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament jumps off. So,
right. So all this is just gonna give fans more of it. They'll act like there's some complaining and folks will just fun. But what's gonna happen when it comes on? Guess where they're gonna be? They're not going to complain to turn it off. They're going to turn it on.
Nope.
So with that being said, let's call it the show. Great dialogue when we looked at and took a show opportunity to really look at the business side of this. So thank you for really getting into it and discussing it. I saw we had a lot of the fans chiming in. Some great content in terms of the lab listeners providing their thoughts. We want more of that. I want to say thank you for listening inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta, Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Again, I want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday at 6 o'clock. Check out Thursday. We may have a show, may not, but we do have our Wednesday Independent. We'll work on to give you an update. As you see, some folks will be trying to move and see if they can start the holiday festivities. So it might make us a little challenge to have a show. We'll work with Bryan and AD and see if we can convince them to hold it down for the lab if they want to squeeze in some time and find a way to talk a little bit about HBCU sports. Maybe we can get their perspective, AD's perspective on some of the things we talked today, and Bryan will be able to dive it and see if they can pull in some other folks that want to talk about it as well. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Threads, Facebook, and Instagram, inside the HBCU Sports Lab on YouTube and Facebook, because your boy will be off camera because I'll be in the Bahamas and I don't want any problems in terms of me relaxing, as I've heard Charles say before. Dream big, continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles?
Of course.
Bryan?
Lecture.
Dismissed.